The applause for my sister's inauguration was still echoing when her voice sliced through it. "You're fired. Security will escort you out." I hadn't even raised my glass for the toast. The ballroom froze. Chairs half-turned, lights trembling on crystal. 200 eyes landing on me like a spotlight I never asked for. No one stepped in. Not my parents. Not my brother. I didn't plead. I didn't argue. I removed the guest badge, set it beside the untouched champagne, and walked toward the doors as the silence folded in behind me. They thought the humiliation ended there. It didn't. It was only the first minute of the countdown. I was 19, the first time I understood how power moved in my family, quietly, carelessly, always in someone else's favor. The warehouse we worked out of back then sat in North Kansas City, a drafty rectangle of concrete and metal shelves. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering just enough to sting the eyes. My father stood beside a folding table holding out a contract that promised a salary none of my friends could dream of. "Take it," he said, already turning toward a stack of shipping reports. My sister Vanessa stood behind him, twirling the new office keys like she'd earned them. She was 21, loud, photogenic, always the one invited to pose for investor photos. I glanced at the salary figure, then at the margins where someone had left smudges of printer ink. "I want equity instead," I said. Dad didn't look up. "Take the salary, Cheryl. It's stable." But stability had never impressed me. Ownership had. I slid the half-page agreement I drafted across the table. The paper looked embarrassingly thin compared to the glossy contract in his hands. He sighed, grabbed a pen, and signed without reading. The TV in the corner was blaring a football game. The moment his team got close to scoring, he stopped paying attention to anything else. His signature shook slightly when the crowd on screen roared. Vanessa leaned in, her voice just loud enough. "You always make things complicated." I said nothing. I tucked the paper into my folder and felt for the first time the shape of my own quiet path forming. A year later, the warehouse was fuller. More workers, more noise, more shipments. When Dad handed out bonuses, Vanessa got hers in an envelope thick enough to thump when she set it down. Mine was a single sheet. "Equity instead," I told him again. He barely blinked before signing another small transfer. Our younger brother, Aiden, had joined by then, stumbling through tasks with the confidence of someone who knew a title was waiting no matter how he performed. When he misplaced a whole week's inventory reports, Dad turned to me. "Fix it." When Vanessa forgot a client call, Mom sighed and said she's under a lot of pressure. I learned early my mistakes were responsibilities. Theirs were inconveniences. The turning point came in 2013 in the living room of our old house. Vanessa was about to sign a partnership deal that would have tied the company into a multi-year financial sinkhole. Her pen hovered over the page, her smile bright for the board members attending over video call. I had seen the numbers. I knew they didn't work. Dad muted the call for a moment, eyes still on the TV. "Is this good or not?" he asked. Instead of arguing, I slipped a single paragraph into the back of the folder, an amendment I'd worked on for weeks. A safeguard clause, a precursor to what would later become Section 14C. "Sign this too," I said. He didn't read it. He never did. His team had just scored again. The pen hit the paper during the replay. Vanessa glanced at me, irritation tightening her jaw. "Why do you always have to be involved?" Always. That word stuck. Like I was an obligation someone had to tolerate, not the one quietly holding the ceiling up. Over the years, I collected more clues, Mom praising Vanessa for ideas I'd drafted Aiden, being congratulated for deals I had negotiated, relatives asking if I still helped out at the family business, like some assistant who wandered in when needed. It wasn't rage that stayed with me. It was a pattern, a long, predictable pattern. And somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting anything different. That was the day I learned my place in this family. 3 hours before the gala, I arrived early enough to slip in unnoticed. The ballroom staff were still adjusting table numbers, polishing silverware, rehearsing the lighting cues for my sister's big moment. My name wasn't on any of their lists. I checked twice just to be sure. On the display screens looping the evening's program, Vanessa's face appeared again and again, our new CEO, her smile bright under the soft gold filter. Aiden stood beside her in the photo labeled VP of Sales. Their titles shone in bold white letters. Underneath a line read, Founding Family Representatives. There was no mention of me, not co-founder, not partner, not anything. A tech coordinator approached with a clipboard. Are you with catering? He asked, polite, distracted. He didn't say it to be cruel, but it landed exactly where the years of erasure had always landed: quiet, efficient, accurate. I stepped past him toward the seating chart, a printout pinned near the bar. My parents sat at table 3, my siblings at table 1. My seat was listed at table 12, a row of unfamiliar names below me. But the detail that held me in place was the label guest. Not family, not executive, just guest. Someone behind me laughed. I turned enough to see Aiden adjusting his cufflinks, the confidence rolling off him like aftershave. You can sit wherever, he said, barely looking up. Tonight's not really about you. The words were small, tossed casually, meant to sting without the effort of intention. And they did, but not in the way he expected, because in that split second, the pattern finally aligned. The childhood glances, the teenage exclusions, the adult dismissals, the unacknowledged deals, the signatures they never read, the titles they took, the credit they absorbed. Everything clicked into a single steady truth: I had been erased long before tonight. Tonight was simply the public version. I looked at my badge, Cheryl Lawson Guest, the laminate cool against my fingers. I slipped the lanyard back over my head and let it rest on my collarbone like a reminder of exactly where they believed I belonged. Aiden waited for a reaction, a frown, a protest, maybe a joke, but I only exhaled through my nose, slow and controlled. So I just smiled. The moment the ballroom doors shut behind me, the noise dropped away like someone had lowered a pane of glass between me and the celebration. Outside, Kansas City air carried the first hints of rain, cool, metallic, steady. I didn't look back. The echo of applause, the shimmer of chandeliers, the image of my sister lifting her champagne flute, they all dissolved as my heels hit the pavement in a clean, unbroken rhythm. I reached my car, the black Tahoe, waiting under the portico lights. The engine turned over with a quiet hum, a sound far steadier than the pulse in my neck. For a moment, I sat still, hands on the wheel, letting the silence settle. Not grief, not anger, just clarity, sharp and decisive. 3 hours. That was all I needed. The drive home cut through long stretches of highway patches, of wet asphalt, reflecting streetlights like fractured glass. I kept the radio off. There was nothing I needed to hear except the soft turn signal clicks marking each decision. When I pulled into the garage, the motion sensor flicked on, casting a cone of white light over the workbench and the laptop I'd left charging since dawn. I didn't go inside the house, I didn't change clothes, I didn't sit. I placed the laptop on the hood of the car and opened it with the same calm I'd used when placing my badge beside the champagne. The screen woke instantly. My face unlocked every folder. Everything was already arranged exactly where it should be prepared long before they imagined they might need to fear me, or more accurately, fear the system they'd ignored. I opened a folder labeled Continuity. Inside were documents spanning 16 years, ownership transfers, agreements, archived emails, notes from board meetings. No one else attended, contracts they signed without reading, clauses accepted during commercial breaks. A map of consequences created not out of revenge, but out of habit. Out of necessity, out of the simple fact that someone had to protect the foundation while they chased the spotlight. I started the sequence. Typed, attached, filed, sent. The encrypted email blast went first. Every board member, including Ms. Cole and Mr. Rivera, who always paid attention when numbers didn't add up. Then Mr. Whitman, the chairman, who read faster than anyone I'd ever met. And finally, Mr. Grant, the attorney who never underestimated a quiet document. Next, I pulled up the courier request. The packets containing the latest filings, stamped and sealed that very morning, only needed one click to trigger pickup. 14 minutes. That was their arrival window. I watched the countdown start, a blue circle tightening on the screen. I refreshed the voting portal, the one I had built years earlier, while debugging the company's disaster recovery software. Clean interface, minimal colors, no chance for manipulation. The numbers at the top, my total percentage, sat where they always had, silent, unadvertised, intact. The second hour slid by without ceremony. I worked steadily, each movement deliberate, checking timestamps, verifying signatures, confirming that the clause I'd added after Vanessa nearly signed that disastrous partnership remained filed in the correct place. It had. Section 14C, buried deep in the bylaws, activated on one specific condition. If a non-equity executive terminated a majority shareholder without unanimous board approval, control reverted instantly. They had handed me the trigger themselves, on stage, in front of 200 witnesses. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. That wasn't who I was. I leaned back for a moment, letting the glow of the garage light stretch across the metal surface of the car. The quiet dripped through the room like a steady leak, soaking into the walls, the concrete floor, the air. A stillness I hadn't felt since before the family split into roles, star, favorite, afterthought. I checked the clock. 1 hour. Enough time for the filings to propagate, for the system to absorb the changes, for the board to prepare their own silent alignments. My phone buzzed once Aiden, then Vanessa, then Mom. None of their calls came through. Every number had been blocked since sunrise. A clean slate, a controlled perimeter. I went back to the screen, reviewed each line, each clause, each timestamp. 16 years of decisions all converging into a single rote. Not revenge, structure. When the final document synced, I closed the laptop halfway, not yet ready to shut it completely. The sound of the hinge stopping mid-motion felt like a held breath. I thought about every time I had fixed their mistakes, covered the losses, rebuilt the numbers, smoothed the cracks they left behind. I had always done it because the company needed it, because someone had to. But tonight, standing alone in a garage lit by a single overhead lamp, the truth rested with a weight that didn't crush it, clarified. This time, I wouldn't fix what they'd broken. I let the laptop click shut. The sound echoed softly across the concrete, final and calm, a line drawn with precision instead of anger. The countdown continued without me having to watch it. 3 hours later, the gala still glowed as if nothing beneath its surface had shifted. Music thinned in the air, the kind that fills space without meaning. Guests balanced plates of desserts, laughing at small jokes, unaware a structure was already trembling under their feet. I stepped through the main doors just as security began repositioning. Their posture changed, first subtle, practiced, instructed. One guard locked the western exit, another sealed the service corridor. No urgency, no theatrics, just procedure. At table 1, my sister paused mid-laugh. Aiden's phone vibrated in his hand, then the first board members. Mr. Whitman rose from his seat at the front of the room. His expression didn't change, but his eyes did a sharp, focused shift, the kind someone makes when information arranges itself into clarity. He adjusted his cuff and nodded once to security. They closed the remaining doors. No one could leave. The murmurs began soft falling like rain before a storm. A woman at table 6 checked her phone, squinted, and passed it to her husband. Someone else whispered, "Is this real?" Another, "Why now?" The lights dimmed one level, a gentle fade orchestrated by the tech crew, triggered by the program I had built years ago. The projector hummed to life, and the 60-foot screen behind the stage lit up with a single title, Emergency Shareholder Meeting, Section 14C activated. Vanessa's breath hitched audibly enough for the guests nearest her to turn. She scanned the room, searching for someone to contradict what she was seeing. Dad, Mom, Aiden, anyone. But everyone was staring at their screens, phones glowing with the filings stamped earlier that morning. I walked the center aisle, the carpet absorbing each step. No entourage, no dramatics, only silence folding open around me. At the podium, I set my laptop down and opened it. The voting portal expanded across the massive display behind me, its white interface harsh against the dimmed gold lighting. "Good evening," I said, voice level. The microphone carried it cleanly. Under Section 14C, control reverts to the majority shareholder. A motion has been filed. Mr. Whitman stepped beside me, hands clasped. Motion to rescind the appointments of Vanessa Lawson as CEO and Aiden Lawson as VP of Sales. Do I have a second? Yes. Second. A chain reaction. Ms. Cole, Mr. Rivera. 3 others. Voices solid. No hesitation. Years of numbers had earned their trust long before tonight. The vote opened. Green for yes, red for no. The first percentage appeared instantly, 58%, then 61%, 65%, 67%. Guests leaned in, watching history unwind in digital increments. Every click from every shareholder echoed through the room without making a sound. At 69%, Vanessa lunged forward. Stop this! You can't vote on a night like tonight. This is my ceremony. Mr. Whitman didn't look at her. This is a legal meeting, Ms. Lawson. Please step back. Aiden tried another angle. Cheryl, come on. This is family. This is structure, Mr. Grant said from somewhere near table 4, lifting his phone. And it's binding. The number ticked once more. 71%. The bar turned solid green across the screen. A hush rolled outward like a slow wave. Someone dropped a spoon. A champagne flute tilted but didn't fall. The string quartet stopped mid-note, bows suspended in the air. Mr. Whitman spoke first. Motion carries, effective immediately. Vanessa stared at the screen as if she could force the pixels to rearrange. This is a mistake. You blindsided us. I didn't respond. I clicked to the next slide, the pre-signed addendum confirming the execution of the transition. The clauses were simple factual, no commentary. A gasp rose from somewhere near the center of the room, then another. Aiden's phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull crack. My parents stood frozen. Mom's fingers trembled near her necklace. Dad blinked slowly as though reading everything for the first time. Not the filings, but the consequences of every signature he'd ever placed without looking. The projector hummed bright and steady. The screen didn't move. It didn't need to. The reversal was complete. 4 months later, the building felt different before I even stepped inside. Not louder, not busier, just aligned. The kind of steadiness a structure has when no one is pulling it apart for attention. Morning light came through the eastern windows in a clean line across the lobby floor, bright enough to soften the metal edges, yet not warm enough to blur them. Perfect balance. My office sat at the end of the hall where the old storage closet used to be. The new nameplate on the door was simple, brushed steel, nothing ornate, nothing celebratory, just my name and the title the vote had made official. I ran a fingertip across the surface, once feeling the coolness of it, the precision. Then I pushed the door open. Inside, everything was quiet. Not silent, just quiet in a way that made sense. The hum of the HVAC, the faint click of someone typing down the hall. Papers stacked the way I liked them. The screensaver on my monitor shifting through muted colors. This was how a company should breathe, evenly, without the weight of egos pressing into the walls, without chaos disguised as charisma, without someone trying to turn board meetings into a stage production. I set my bag down and opened the blinds wider. From the window, the city moved at its usual pace, cars easing through morning traffic, pedestrians bracing against a light wind, the rest of the world minding its own business. And for the first time in years, so was I. Vanessa listed her lake house after the vote. The listing photos made their rounds online, staged fruit bowls, polished countertops, empty rooms trying too hard to look lived in. Aiden tried the job market, but the non-compete held firm. Dad and Mom left for a quieter life in Florida soon after avoiding questions they couldn't answer. They all reached out eventually. A text, a voicemail, a forwarded email from an old address, apologies, explanations, memory, rewrites. I let them all pass through the filter I set long ago. None landed, none needed to. Some endings don't require doors slamming. Some don't need speeches or victories or final confrontations. Sometimes the ending is just a room steady, quiet yours. Some people think power belongs to whoever stands at the microphone. They're wrong. Power sits quietly in the documents no one bothers to read, in the signatures they rush through, in the structures they never believed could turn. My family learned that the hard way, and I learned something simpler. Silence isn't weakness, it's direction. If stories like this stay with you,